Listening to Adam take us through a journey of personal resilience through tragedy, but uniquely how it feels when others assist and try to help, and the best way that they can assist and help, as well as the personal anecdotes of how we ourselves can increase our own resilience in life, is extraordinary. Listening to Rabbi Rappaport enumerate just inspirational responsa that reiterates what Rabbi Rappaport said, that history is there to really shape our future. Experiencing at first hand the true resilience of the Jewish people. I wanted to summarize just a few thoughts. I'm a little bit daunted because I did bump into a psychologist who works extensively with youth coming down the stairs into the hall, and by no way, shape, or form am I a professional. But these are simple anecdotes and thoughts over about 25 years of working with youth and children that I just thought I'd just share with you. Today it's a little bit hard because you're not supposed to delve deeply. Rabbi Rappaport just touched the surface of the questions, but you're not supposed to delve too deeply into areas of Torah, except for very prescribed, sad, historical areas. And a lot of resilience does touch upon the uplifting parts of Torah. So I am going to gloss over them. There really is a lot further. There's a lot more to discuss. And I just want to say that the bookmark idea is not mine. It comes from a guru of mine. His name is Michael Fullan. I think he's written about 40 or 50 books. He's an old man. He lives somewhere between Australia, Canada, and Denmark, and the highest performing educational societies in the world. And he said something extraordinary. He said that if you're ever in business, or you're ever in school, or you're ever in any form of organization, and it's time to redo your strategic plan. So he says if you write a strategic plan that's 5 pages long, or write a strategic plan that's 30 pages long, he said you might have wasted about 5 hours or 30 hours or more. He said, if your strategic plan can't fit on a bookmark, that's what he said. It means that you can hold it in front of your eyes in your consciousness, wherever you are and whatever you do, throughout the business of the organization. He said, then it's a piece of paper that goes onto the shelf that you look at when it's the next time to revise your strategic plan. So what I tried to do is just summarize 10 resilience building habits. Because resilience is really about flexing the muscle, it's about working on a skill, it's about improving and increasing our capacity for resilience. It's not that all of a sudden I come across a challenge or a tragedy or something happens in my life, now I'm going to be very resilient. No. You got to work on it all the time. So that when you do come across those challenges or tragedies, you're in a position where your reservoirs, your capabilities of resilience and protective factors and behaviors and elements in your life all around you are there for you to call upon. If you do a search in YouTube, you've Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky, lobsters. Just have to type in the word lobsters next to his name. He's a famous gentleman also. He's written probably even more books than Michael Fullan. So he gives a 1-minute video that I enjoy. I watch it about once a year. And he says that lobsters, particularly large ones, he says they live in a very tough shell. And it's amazing because as they grow, they're very soft inside. It's almost liquidy, the inside. It's very soft, and it starts to push outwards. And the pressure builds until it becomes not just pressure, and it becomes painful for the lobster. And it's so painful that it becomes time, it's almost like in a state of trauma. It becomes time for it to dive deep, bury itself somewhere beneath a rock or between a ledge or something, and its shell starts to crack off and disintegrate. And at that point in time, it is so vulnerable because its soft inside is exposed, its hard shell is gone, and slowly the shell starts to regenerate. A newer, thicker, larger shell. And he says this happens to all living creatures. And this is really what tonight is about, or at least that was what it was advertised. that building our own capacity for resilience through the challenges, through the trauma, through the tragedies that we've experienced in our lives, be it the collective tragedies that we heard referred to, both by Adam and by Rabbi Rappaport, or by personal tragedies, as we've heard anecdotes of tonight. So I'd like to start with habit number 1, which is connect. Connect deeply and widely with others. Now, genuinely connecting, we all understand what this is. But if you're actually taking an interest in anybody you come across in life, you're genuinely interested in people. There are some people that are so good just at staying in touch. I envy those people. They naturally do it. Like they can move cities, they can move countries, they can be in different workplaces, different social settings, but they're so good at staying in touch with people. Staying in touch with people itself is connecting. If people who like them. So if you walk over to somebody and you say, I really like the color of your jumper, but you mean it, and you look them in the eyes, give them a real compliment. You're lifting them up, you automatically lift yourself, wherever you are. If you adopt an attitude in your head, and this is an amazing attitude, I am not going to come across anybody in my life without leaving them better off, or uplifted, or at least smiled at. At least I can do that, or perhaps even greet them. If I can leave them better off than before they met me, you're genuinely connecting with people. Obviously, to avoid people who bring you down, who bring out the worst in you, people who really you don't have that much patience for, you obviously have to work on it. But the one thing you can't do is you never blame yourself if not everybody you come across likes you, because you can't help that. There's an amazing pasuk in Mishlei, and again, I'm very wary of going too deep into Torah right now, because it's a beautiful pasuk, but it's Kamayim hapanim el panim kein leva adam la'adam, which means that the face of man, as it looks into water, you see your reflection. So too is the face, the heart. When you look into somebody else's heart, they reflect your feelings back to you. The way you treat other people when you uplift them, they literally give it back to you. And I heard a story of a year 4 girl. I heard this from her teacher. It was subsequently published. And her teacher had a really hard morning. He got into a fight with his wife on the way to school. His kids were late. They didn't end up with breakfast. They took it in the car. One of them spilled the yogurt on the seat. He had a really hard morning. By the time he got to school, he was really frazzled. But he tried every morning to greet his year 4 student standing at the door with a smile. And as he walked past this little girl, she turned to him and she said, "I'm sorry you had a bad morning." And he looked at her. And he said, how did you even know? He looked to see if he's got yogurt on his pants or something. How did you even know? And she said, "I'll tell you, my daddy told me that when you really smile, your eyes smile. And your eyes aren't smiling." And it's an amazing thing. But if we smile at people with our eyes, Kamayim panim el panim ken leva adam el adam, that is connecting deeply with people. Number 2 is de-traumatize. De-traumatize yourself regularly, and I put in there guardian angel. Didn't know how else to put it. So it's almost like conducting a little self-checkup. How do I feel at any given point in time? You don't do it all the time because you spend the whole day thinking about yourself and thinking about how you feel. And it doesn't change that often, although some people it does. Those people are very interesting. But what am I enjoying right now? What's bothering me? What am I carrying with? What's been the self-talk narrative that's been going on in my head for a while? All of us carry some level of stress or some level of trauma and change. We all do. Trauma-informed approaches to therapy and business. There's an enormous field of ever-expanding research, but that trauma can come from, disappointments, relationship changes, tragedies, stressors, loss, a lot of just moving, a lot of things. So you take a cheshbon hanefesh, you take a self-reckoning and accounting, just to understand yourself. A good time to do that, by the way, and I know this may be contrary to modern psychological advice, is right before you go to sleep, when you say the bedtime Shema, because David HaMelech, in his wisdom, says, Be'erev yalin bechi v'laboker rina. If I go to bed at night crying or sleeping or reevaluating, I'll wake up singing. You wake up refreshed and rejoicing. You wake up dancing. So the first part of de-traumatizing yourself is to deeply be in touch with how you actually are. And don't deny it, don't fool yourself. There's a second part, and you cannot do de-traumatization, which is, I don't know if it's a real word, but you cannot do it without the second part. You cannot de-traumatize without another person. You have to do it together with somebody who you can connect with. You can't do it on your own, it's impossible. In fact, it says in Mishlei, Daga balev ish yasichena v'davar tov yisamchena. Little play on the word yasichena, so it's a little bit of literary license, but a person who has a daga balev, a worry in your heart, yasichena, not literal, but speak about it, siach, talk about it, tell it to somebody. And then, the davar tov, they'll give you a good word, and yisamchena, it'll bring out the inner joy. The only way you can truly de-traumatize and convert your worries, your pressures, into something positive is with somebody else. And this is your guardian angel. This is where the Mishnah in the first parak of Pirkei Avot comes in. Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a mentor or somebody who can really connect with you, look out for you, even when you're too busy, too pressured, too preoccupied, too traumatized perhaps, too upset to really think about it. They can come and say, you know, you look like you need a hug. You look like you need a pick-me-up. You look like you need to talk to somebody or something. A really good friend. You can only de-traumatize properly with a guardian angel. Habit number 3. And these are habits that we can practice literally on a weekly basis, whether you are the guardian angel for somebody else or somebody else is for you. Belong and find a meaning in groups. Now, some people are blessed with a natural ability, whether it's in their family or extended family. You know, I came across somebody who is having her first baby, and she's in a Greek family, and she told me she's taking 1 year maternity leave. And I said, oh wow, that's amazing, you know, do you have family support? She almost laughed in my face. She says, I have 70 babysitters waiting to look after this yet unborn child. And I thought, wow, it sounds like an extended Jewish family. Some people are really blessed with a deep sense of belonging to family. But whether you have a big family or a small family, the earlier mention of connect, friendships, that's why you also find sometimes, you know, if you catch up with classmates who you went to school with, or, you know, graduated high school with or something, even if you haven't seen them for a long time, they're there, you belong, you feel a deep sense of connection and belonging to them. If you've ever been to like a high school reunion or anything. Sports clubs and teams, a shul group, being part of a shul, or a shul that's going through change or growth, or, you know, the Kiddush club, or, I don't know, that's why I think, by the way, they used to create women's auxiliary groups and things before shuls were so integral to the entire Jewish family, women or men. You know, being part of a shul, even in the workplace, if you belong. Now, it's an extraordinary thing. You don't need a lot of groups. You need deeper groups where you feel that you truly belong. But there's something to really think about, that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lezeh, it's repeatedly stated in the Gemara, every single person is part of Am Yisrael. We do belong to each other. And you can feel that. You can really feel it as you go around the world and come across another Jewish person, wherever you are. It's actually extraordinary. It's so true. You know, a Jew finds a Jew. And then you have zero degrees of separation. One of the amazing things, I was sitting in LA airport about just over a month ago, 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I was a little bit annoyed. My flights had changed, and I was reading, and there was like a flashing billboard that they had all around the airport. I'm not quoting it correctly, but it said something like, "We won't stop until we are all well." Michelle Obama, a mental health initiative. So it was something to do with making sure that every single person receives the help, the support, the deep sense of belonging, the resilience, or whatever it is to address any mental health challenge that they're facing. But if we ask ourselves, where do we belong? Where do I belong? And how do I help others belong? How am I increasing their resilience? Then we are doing habit number 3, belonging. Shift your radar. Appreciate the positive whilst being realistic. And this is really important. You know, we experience more than 7 7,000 on average, unless you stay awake for too long, but 7,000 items of stimuli per day. It could be a sight, a sound, a smell, a human interaction, a thought, a feeling, an idea, a sensation of any kind. Now, we cannot process 7,000 stimuli a day. It's not possible. We would be exhausted very early in the day, wouldn't even be able to finish it. We can't focus on all of them. But we can choose which stimuli we focus on. So we can create the narrative of our day, of our story, the story of our day. So it's all based on our perceptions. You know, today I'm having a bad day. Everything is going wrong. I've got every red light. My regular parking spot wasn't taken. I walked into work and a colleague was mean to me. Whatever. Today I'm having a bad day. Doesn't mean that all 7,000 stimuli are bad. But that's what we notice that day. That's what we're focused on. Or today, I'm having such a good day, nothing could go wrong. I'm on the top of the world. I'm in a great mood. You know, it's about what I'm focusing on, my stimuli. Now we have all the days in between. Now we can change a little bit of that focus. So there's actually a couple of practical activities. The first one is the appreciation activity. If you genuinely show somebody appreciation for anything, it doesn't matter what. It could be the checkout person, it could be a person who holds the door for you. You look them in the eye, you say thank you, you actually start to change your focus because you're focused on a chesed, you're focused on a positive. Or a more blatant and very commonly publicized activity, and I actually tried this recently. You sit around with the family at dinner and you ask each person really to state one thing or two things or three things that they are grateful for, that they appreciate. Watch how the mood lifts. Watch how the positive dialogue flows. Watch how you have just created so much positive energy in the family, in the room. It's quite amazing. And that appreciation is so deep. Despite the stereotypical Jewish kvetchy kind of attitude that we promulgate, it's so far from who we really are. When Leah's fourth son, Leah, the wife of Yaakov Avinu, her fourth son was born, she was so ecstatic because she just had greater than 1/4 of all the Jewish nation that would be born. They knew there would be 12 tribes. She was so ecstatic, she said, Hapam oda et Hashem al ken karashmo Yehuda. Now I am truly appreciative. And that's why she called his name Yehuda, Hoda'ah. Thank you. Hashem, I have given birth to the fourth of the 12 tribes, more than my fair share. You have given me tremendous bracha. And in fact, that name Yehuda has become so intrinsic to the Jewish nation that every Jew is called a Yehudi, a person that shows appreciation. So much so the Gemara says, if you can't appreciate others, you have to check their pedigree and their lineage and see if they're actually Jewish. You need to show appreciation. It's very powerful to shift your radar, at the same time being realistic and not fooling yourselves and looking, that saying, look at the world through rose-colored glasses. You do need to realize there are challenges. You do need to realize the hurt and the pain of other people around you and other problems and things. But at the same time, you do need to shift your radar and choose to see that positive. Habit number 5 is presence. Practice being here. Now, it's very cliche. It's a buzzword. We talk about concentration or meditation or mindfulness or being present, being fully aware. There's an amazing Mishnah in Brachot, and it's brought down in Halacha. Ein omdim le'panel ela mitoch koved rosh. You're not allowed to daven except from a state of focused, serious. There are a lot of offshoots from this. For example, it says that if you need to relieve yourself and you're in shul and you really feel a sensation, you actually need to go because you're not focused anymore. You're not davening. You need to be fully focused. The same thing, you're not supposed to engage in any form of business or other form of transaction early in the morning, even if you're trading in different time zones or whatever it is, because you're then your mind somewhere else. You need to be focused before you daven to clear your mind, to clear your heart. Now, we live in a hyper-distracted world. I was at a parent presentation this week by a local police officer. Her name is Yasmin London. I hope I got her name right. And I heard her say that it is not good enough, and she's the youth liaison and a cyber expert, and she's also a YouTube sensation. She has an inadvertent YouTube of her dancing on Bondi Beach that's been viewed by 6.5 million people. But, so she said, if you have your phone down on the table in front of you at dinner, she said, that is not being present. Face down. That is absolutely not being present. Why? Because the entire time it's there, you're sitting and restraining yourself. You're sitting and focusing, I am not touching my phone now. So you're so not present, just because you're trying hard not to touch your phone. That's not called being present. She suggests having it in a completely different room in order to be present. You know, I'm just going to share with you just the power of presence, and presence of mind, and presence of relating to other people. I read this story in another author's book that I appreciate. He said that he travels quite a bit lecturing, and he was in a subway station in Chicago. And the subway stations in Chicago, I think it was in the 80s, early 80s. And subway stations in Chicago in the early 80s were not pretty. And there were there's a lot of poverty in the subway station, poor people. He said there was a Native American Indian in full headgear sitting there in the subway station, and he had a little sign on a ripped piece of cardboard and a little bucket in front of him with people tossing coins. On the sign it said, "Ask me anything." That's what it said on the sign. So he walked over to him and he tossed a coin in, and he says, in 1974, on the 4th of February, what did you eat for breakfast? And he says, eggs. Fine. He really, afterwards, thought, pretty stupid question, but anyways, how was he supposed to check? He said about 10 years later, in the early 90s, he found himself in Chicago again, in the subway station, and he came across the same Indian headdress-wearing beggar. And the card's there, and his bucket's there, and he comes over to him, and he says the traditional Indian greeting, "How?" And he says, "It's scrambled." And the beauty of it, why do I love this story? It's because we all experience this scrambled egg story at different points in time in our life. I'll give you an example. If you think back to a time when you were so present, you had heightened consciousness, a total focus. It could be a bar bat mitzvah, it could be at your wedding day, it could be at a tragedy, it could be when your child was born, or at a Brit. It could be when you had to make a dissertation or a presentation of sorts. You remember details. You can remember what you were wearing. You remember thinking, you remember a pimple on your nose. You remember the menu. You remember what people say to you years and years and years later. Because you are in a completely heightened state of consciousness. You are totally present. Now, it's hard to walk through life with that level of presence, focus, and hyper-consciousness. But if we can work on clearing a little bit of our inner chatter, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, by slowing our breathing, focusing, we can raise our awareness, and in particular, both when we talk to other people, and when we omdim nitpalel, when we come to talk to Hashem, when we daven mitoch koved rosh, with that true focus. It increases our resilience. Habit 6 is hope. Now, I've worded this a little bit carefully because challenge can lead to growth. Not always does it lead to growth. It depends what you do with challenge. But it can always lead to growth. And there's a famous Yiddish expression called trachgut, meaning think positive, be hopeful. It's a bit hard in today's world, by the way, especially for young people who are social media gurus, because the epitome of social media makes them feel less positive about themselves. Because all you see is magnificent people, everyday people, but on social media, there are amazing experiences all the time. They're posting stories about themselves. They're posting images of them smiling and having coffee, having a successful shopping spree, enjoying themselves sitting in the sun on the beach. They're posting this surreal world instead of showing that sometimes life is a bit tough. Sometimes, there's failure, there's vulnerability in our world and our lives. So resilience helps us it helps us face the reality of life. And now there's a psychologist who I've heard speak many times, so I do recommend him, Andrew Fuller. He speaks about resilience. The only issue is that he uses a lot of foul language. But and can't bring him to talk to kids anymore. But I made that mistake once. And he's mapped the lives of hundreds of very successful people by the definitions of society. And he said, in almost 99% of the time, it's amazing, they came from a time or an experience in their life of harsh adversity to sustained positive growth. Now, it doesn't mean rapid positive growth, sustained positive growth. And he said one of the reasons why, and we heard Adam refer to it, and we heard Rabbi Rappaport refer to it, they focused on like a purpose, they focused on a goal, they had hope. And that challenge led them directly to growth. Socialize. Habit number 7, engage in uplifting socializing. Now, everyone knows V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha because Rabbi Akiva made it very popular. Because we love ourselves, so we've got to love others, says Rabbi Akiva, l'reacha, other people, kamocha, as much as we have self-love. Sometimes in today's world, and I come across this a lot with young people, I say to them, no, I want you to love yourself as much as you love other people. There are so many people, particularly young people sometimes, they feel sometimes inadequate. They feel they're non-lovable. They feel sometimes, and I'm using a very harsh word, that they're cringe-worthy. Everybody else around them has more than they do and is so cool and so lovable and so with it and so likable, and sometimes they don't feel so good about themselves. So it's really important sometimes to engage in that personal reflection of loving yourself. Now, there's some practical ways to do that. Another way of really looking at this is to enrich your social experience. Many of us hang with people who are very similar to us. We kind of like, you walk into a big crowded room and you'll go to somebody who you feel very comfortable with because you've got a common interest, you've got something to talk about. Or I'm from, originally immigrated from this country, so I'm in this social clique and I'm in that social clique. And you hang with people that reinforce your beliefs, that make you feel comfortable. But what's really powerful is to socialize with people that are very different than you, to have conversations with people that you disagree with people that are on a completely different side, perhaps, of the political spectrum, or religious beliefs, or beliefs about Israel, Zionism, or anything that's really close to your heart, and try to really appreciate their position, their opinions, their thoughts. Not because they're going to convince you of anything. Not necessarily are they going to change your mind. Not going to think like that. But because you'll become a richer and deeper person for it, because you've engaged in that positive socializing. Good friendships, clear friendships, we've heard that straight from Adam today. It is a direct protective factor when a psychologist does a risk assessment for children or family systems therapy. They look at the friendships. It is a huge protective factor against substance abuse. It helps mitigate some mental health challenges. So friendships are very, very powerful and important. I used to have, there was a person I used to come across very often, and extended family member, and I used to say to him, so how's your wife? And he used to say, she's a very lucky woman. That's what he always said. And I won't tell you that they're not married today, but and it really bothered me. She's a very lucky woman. But if one way of really building close friendships is by deciding, I am so lucky to know you. I am so fortunate that you are in my life. I am so appreciative that I know you. And if you want to understand what it means to appreciate to know somebody, so just look at what teenagers do when they meet in their minds a superstar and see how excited they are to actually know somebody. So if you were that excited, I don't mean it in that external way, that's not a very good example, but to really, and a simple task, and I ask myself this question sometimes, is if you've made brief, warm eye contact with the person or the friend, so much so that you can tell yourself the color of their eyes. What color are their eyes? Means that you've actually engaged. You've looked at, don't stand looking at the color of their eyes all the time, because you're not going to be listening. But You're generally interested and focused on what they're saying. They feel valued. Positive socializing is a huge resilience building habit. Empowerment. Stretch and energize yourself. So empowerment is shifting the mindset from, no, I can't, to yes, I can. Now, it's nice to talk about that. There's a little choo-choo train that we all grew up with that talks about that. It's the basis of, lifelong learning, growth mindset, being able to change careers midstream, like a lot of young people need to do today, and even us that aren't so young. It sounds like a pretty resilience-building habit. Empowerment, yes, I can, but how do you really do that? So here's a couple of practical things. The first is, in Hebrew, there's a concept, philosophical concept called Mach Shalit al Halev, which means the mind rules the heart. In psychological terms, you might call it visualization. I read this experiment about 25 years ago, and I read it again last year, that they took elite athletes and they hooked them up to neurotransmitters, very famous experiment, widely published, many of you have heard of this experiment. And they took they sat them down, still in a room on a chair with these neurotransmitters, and they had them visualize their next major sporting event. Whether it's slalom skiing or shot put, it didn't matter what it was, high jump, it really didn't matter. They had them sit there and visualize the single most successful performance they have ever done in their life. They're sitting there visualizing that. And they found that the neurotransmitters picked up that the activity in their brain was lighting up exactly in the same place and the same intensity, and sometimes even more intense, than the neurotransmitters that were attached to them when they actually participated in the event. It was as if they were experiencing that successful experience. And so it's like backwards planning. You think, visualize the success, experience it even before it happens, bring yourself all the way back to the present, and now walk through the steps that you need to take in order to get there. That's point number 1 of empowerment. Point 2 is lead. Some people think they're not a leader. The solution to thinking, I am not a leader, so how do you want me to lead, is to actually get up and lead, do something. We see that 2 weeks ago when we were introduced to a slightly previously obscure character in the Torah called Pinchas, the grandson of Aaron. Not that well known. He was the only member of his family who wasn't yet a Kohen, because unfortunately he was born before the Kahuna was gifted to Aaron and his sons. And he was a junior. Yet he saw something horrible happening. And he stood up, and despite the fact that there were greater people around him, leaders all around, he took a lead. He did something. He just did something. He was a bit audacious. Got into a bit of trouble afterwards, and it's good that Moshe and Hashem helped him out. But from that point in time onwards, he actually became a leader. In the very next parsha, we're introduced to him as a general of an elite task force. Because he led, he turned into a leader. So look for a leadership opportunity and just grab it. And the third point I'd like to make is just what I call stretch. It's not my term. Just stretch your mind, stretch your heart, stretch your body, stretch your soul. How do you do that? You pick a new experience that you're uncomfortable with, or you're not used to. Teaching yourself a new skill. I like to do it, just on a personal note. I have an app that I recommend widely, before it was even on national television. I've been using it for years, called Blinkist. It's very expensive, but you can read hundreds of non-fiction books in 12 minutes. Because it's an audio and summarizing all the main salient points of non-fiction books, so you can learn a lot. Or you wear a smartwatch that measures some form of your health. So you're measuring and beating, and you're pushing yourself, stretching yourself to beat previous goals, previous measurements. Or you push yourself out of your spiritual comfort zone. Take on a mitzvah, and it has to be doable, and it can't be too hard, but something that you're uncomfortable with. Something that's a bit challenging. If giving tzedakah is annoying for you, then push yourself. Give twice as much as you feel. If coming to a minyan a couple of extra times, I don't know. Or go to Rabbi Rappaport's shiur. You can really, if you take something, sorry, I didn't say it's difficult. Where's the Rabbi Rappaport? If you push yourself beyond, if you stretch yourself, teach yourself something new. Go ice skating. I don't know. I grew up on ice skating and ice hockey. But so push yourself out of the comfort zone. do something, that really increases your resilience. Let's stretch. Habit 9, I'm nearly done, is take your meds. Now, habit 9, you can see there, is meditation, exercise, diet, and sleep. In other words, I'm asking you, and this is not my words, to be your own health consultant. You are your own health consultant. Whether you are the typical hypocritical Jewish parent or proverbial Jewish parent who looks after and worries about everybody else, doling out unsolicited advice and neglecting themselves and their own health, or Jordan Patterson actually said something amazing in his book, 12 Habits. He said, take as much care of yourself as you do of your pet, your dog, if you have a dog. He says, when you have a dog, you buy highly nutritious, you check very highly nutritious dog food and doggy treats, and you brush them down and you groom them and you pat them. They've got a lot of positive energy, so good healthy food, they're well groomed. And if the dog is a little bit sick, you take it to the vet because you have pet health insurance. You take good care of your dog. At least take as much care of your own health. And at least do it for the sake of the people around you. So just very quickly, the M in meds is meditation. A couple of things that I found very powerful. Besides the focus and kavanah that we were talking about earlier, when it comes to tefillah, there are 3 apps that I personally have used and watched many adults and children use very successfully. 3 apps that help you with mindfulness and meditation as short or as long as you want. One of them is Buddhify. It has nothing to do with Buddha. The next one is very famous, Headspace and Smiling Minds. So Buddhify, Headspace, and Smiling Minds. I think 2 of them are free. One of them I think you pay $7 or something for. If you do, you can buy premium versions and all these things. But it's quite amazing how you feel when you take care of that mindfulness and meditation. Obviously, exercise breeds exercise. It gets you out of a vicious cycle or rut, releases endorphins, helps your posture, your confidence, your energy levels. And your food defines your mood. And that's a quote from the Rambam. And he wrote that most of a millennia ago. So we've known that for a millennia. That if we eat certain things, we feel sluggish and slow and heavy. And if we eat other things, it lifts us up. And we kind of know the knowledge today of what healthy food looks like is extraordinary. And obviously, sleep and the sleep revolution, again, the Rambam prescribes how much sleep. He talks about sleep deficit, which is a modern term. He doesn't use the word sleep deficit. And anyone that wants some level of inspiration, several years ago, Arianna Huffington from Huffington Post wrote a book about it because she completely broke herself by preventing healthy sleep habits. And I always remember that says that if you're in a huge sleep deficit, so if you went to bed 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and you're up by 6, 6:30 in the morning, so you get 4 hours sleep, it's like walking through your entire day after having drunk 2 beers. 2 beers. That's how conscious you are. So you've got to really think through that. Some people, obviously, 2 beers does nothing. Now, habit number 10. Last habit for the day, and I'm going to rip through the bonus ones, which are really together. Amunah that leads to maaseh, faith that leads to action. So what we really, to illustrate this, this happened in Long Beach, California, in Orange County, in a synagogue there, a small synagogue, Rabbi Newman synagogue. There was a elderly man standing in the back of the shul arguing with one of the young rabbinical students who was there for the summer. And he said, I am a self-proclaimed atheist. And he was arguing with him about the Holocaust and how could he believe and everything. And this young man is desperately trying to respond and retort or, just kind of defend the religion. This atheist is attacking him. And this elderly man says, excuse me, just a second. I actually need to say Kaddish. And it continues with Kaddish. We had a chiyuv that day. It was a yortzeit. And the reason why I share that is because every single Yid, every Jew has an intrinsic deep emunah, a faith. It's there. The connection's there, you can't sever it. Our job is sometimes just to bring it out. Our challenge is to expose that emunah. Michael Cargreg, who I've met many times, and after one of his last presentations, my wife and I went over to talk to him a little bit. He claims, by the way, he is Jewish, which is extraordinary, and I think he is. But he says that you Jewish people, he talks about rituals a lot. He talks about family rituals, life rituals. family routines, it's like, the old-fashioned, coming home from work, kicking off your shoes, putting on your slippers, getting into your favorite chair, having a hot tea, and sitting down with the paper. That's a ritual. But there are a lot of rituals that we do. Unfortunately, too many of them involve that little device in our pocket, but we can have meaningful rituals in our world and in our family and in our life. And he says, create those rituals, like that gratitude exercise with the family, or different rituals creating. He says Jews have so much ritual built into their life cycle, their weekly, monthly, annual life cycle. Whether it's a Yom Tov or Shabbat. He was describing everything. He said it's amazing. And he said the first thing you need to do to understand the power of connection of emunah, and this is a very deep Torah concept, is do it. Do it first. And in fact, it comes from the very simple response the Jewish people gave when Hashem said, do you want the Torah? And they said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, and then we will learn and understand it. First act, first try it, first do it. Then you'll understand. And the very famous simple explanation that we are taught to give to kids is that if I turn around and say, you know what, I don't understand the respiratory system or the digestive system fully. I don't fully appreciate it. So you know what, I am not going to breathe until I have a total comprehension of the respiratory system and why do I need to breathe? Why do I need to do it? It's the same thing with the spiritual system of Torah mitzvot, of connecting and revealing that deeper faith, that deeper emunah. You can't turn around and say, I'm not going to do it until I fully comprehend and understand, because to understand the respiratory system, you've got to study medicine, then study specializing. You've got years of study and learning, and even then they continue learning and studying and going to conferences. Doctors seem to always be at conferences. I have a lot of good friends that are doctors. And thank God they are, because science and technology and learning keeps on progressing. Same thing in Judaism. The understanding and the depth of appreciation. So to reveal that emunah, first act, first try, and then you'll come to appreciate it. Because those rituals in your life, emunah, that lead straight to maaseh, to action, are extremely protective and huge resilience building factors in a person's life. Those are the 10 habits, and just very quickly for the bonus habits, and the reason why I put them as bonus habits is because you cannot do them too often, because they're very challenging, and you'll see you only do them at certain times in your life. And the bonus habits are core values: who are you and what do you stand for? And positive identity: make yourself come alive. So there are a lot of exploratory exercises of how to find your core values. Stephen Covey, in his original book, he wrote that what you do is you imagine your own funeral, and he says, write your own eulogy. It's a little bit morbid, but it's too morbid for me. But he says, what do you want to be remembered for? That what? That you worked really hard, and that you stayed in the office late, and that you did unbelievable, you changed the bottom line. I don't know. What do you want to be remembered for? And he says it's a striking activity. And then think backwards through your life until today. So it is a visualization activity. But there are other more positive ways of exploring your core values. You can ask yourself just a series of simple questions. How do I define myself? And it's usually you define yourself by the way other people look at you, which is also a way of understanding. In my family life, my professional life, my social life, my community life, my spiritual life, bring it all together into one, boil it down just to a couple of core values, maybe 3, 5, 6, and write them down. You can even write them down on a little bookmark. But you almost don't need to, because once you get to those core values, they'll resonate with you. So they'll be in the forefront of your consciousness. You don't even need to keep looking at a piece of paper. And then you can turn around and say, and we do this with children all the time. You take the class clown, who's a troublemaker, and you try to help them rethink how they want people to perceive them. So to recreate a more positive identity of themselves, how they are viewed by other people. In other words, fake it till you make it. In Judaism, if a person pretends to be more pious, so let's say they stand there praying with such unbelievable fervor, and they're completely absorbed into whatever they're doing, and you turn around and think, I know you, and you are not at that spiritual level. What the heck are you doing? Like if you pretend to be a better human than you are. You pretend to be more kind. You pretend to be more of a high energy, high impact, positive person, uplifting the lives of other people around you. Then they know you are. And you know what? If you pretend long enough, it becomes part of you. It starts to become your new positive identity. So the 2 bonus rounds, you can't practice these. The top 10 are like weekly habits or monthly habits. You can practice them very often. But the bonus round, exploring your core values, and then rewriting your positive identity, which takes quite a bit of time and practice. Exploring your core values, by the way, can take hours of writing and clarifying and trying and thinking and really experiencing. And then rewriting your positive identity is very, very powerful. These are a simple, really simple observations, 10 resilience-building habits. If you didn't get one of these, I'm happy to send it to you. If you email anybody at Moriah College, and they'll forward it to me. My email is college principal. If you didn't get one, I don't know if everybody did. And I think that it's it took a lot of foresight of Rabbi Rabbi Rappaport to actually take the essence of Tisha B'Av, which is being aware. I hate when people think Judaism is all doom and gloom and sadness. It is sometimes. But we take that and we package it up into an intense few weeks, into an intense 9 days, into an intense 24 hours, called Tisha B'Av. And the reason why we do that is because we want to take that challenge, that inspiration, and we want to turn it into sustained growth, increased resilience, both collectively as a nation and personally. And God willing, we won't make it through the entire Tisha B'Av because we'll have the Bet HaMikdash rebuilt already. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you, Rabbi Smukler. To raise a child in a Jewish tradition, you require family, you require school, and you require community. And therefore, we very much appreciate to be able to join forces with Moriah College here at Kilat Kadima, and hopefully we'll continue many other occasions in the future. But I do want to pick up on one thing Rabbi Smukler said. He said, stretch yourself, and he spoke about the difficult task of coming to my shiurim. He spoke about stretching in other ways, so the challenge I put forth is to take all the examples he gave and put them together. We're going to do my shiur on an ice rink, in a different language, and we're going to charge you twice as much. But on that note, I do want to bring your attention, whilst I have you here, this Wednesday, the 14th,